Hi everyone, I'm just going to wait for a few more people to hop on and then we'll get cracking. I've got a couple of minutes until start anyway. It's lovely to see so many of you hopping on already. Really lovely. Hello. Oh, I've had somebody in the chat saying that you're in Saudi. I have a student in Saudi that I see once a week. Hello. So many of you. This is going to be so cool. Right. So we've still got a couple of minutes until start anyway, but I will sort of run through housekeeping, what's going to go on, that sort of thing, if you haven't been to one of these sessions before. So my name's Vicky. I did an undergraduate at the University of York in English Language and Linguistics, graduated in 2018, and then I trained to be a teacher the year after that and became a tutor. So I will be teaching the next 3 sessions on English language paper 1 question 2. This is for AQA. If you're not on AQA, that's fine, don't worry about it. Most of the stuff we're going to be doing today is completely transferable to any exam board. You'll pretty much have to do something along these lines for every exam board. And if you're not doing exam board stuff yet, if you're not in year 10 or year 11, this is still stuff that you will need and will use in a classroom. So don't worry about that too much in terms of whether it's for you, shall we say. It can sort of be moulded into what you need. It's rather flexible. So over the next 3 weeks, we are going to be looking at paper 1 question 2, which is all about language device usage. So we've got today, we're going to be looking at Lord of the Flies, and then next week I think is A Christmas Carol, and then the following week I think is The Lovely Bones. So I think I've pretty much told you everything about me that's already on this page. I've been a tutor since September 2019. Done over 800 one-to-one and 3-to-1 lessons on my tutor. I've done lots of these before as well, and I'm slowly creeping my way up to 1,000 overall, so I'm getting the party cannons out shortly. Right, let's move that out of the way so I don't show you my messages. Right, so let's get cracking. So as I mentioned, this is AQA, but you can use it for anything else at all. It's completely transferable. If you've got any questions, some of you people have already beat me to it, put them in either the Q&A or the chat. I don't mind either one. I check both of them as I go along. So if you've got any bigger burning questions about English that aren't necessarily related to this topic, that's fine. I will pop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll come back to them towards the end of the session, because I'll leave some time for us to do that. If it's all to do with what we are looking at and you have a specific question, then jump on, that's fine, and I'll pick that up as I go along. I think it's the easiest way to do it. And yeah, if you'd like to interact with me as much as possible, I'll throw some questions out to you as well. It makes it a bit more fun and interesting, I think, at least for me. Right, let me just check the chat before we get cracking. Right. So, is Lord of the Flies a set text? Yes, it is. So it is definitely on the AQA, English language, not English language, English literature, as one of the 20th century texts. However, most schools don't do Lord of the Flies. They tend to go for an Inspector Calls, which we won't be covering over these few weeks to answer another question. However, we're not approaching this from we've read the book and we're going to talk about the entire thing. We're going to be looking at a couple of paragraphs and that's it. So you don't need any background knowledge for this. I'm not expecting you to. If anything, it might be slightly better if you don't have any background knowledge, because the temptation tends to be, oh, well, I've read this book and I know this, this, and this. And then you go off and talk about something which is lovely, but isn't appropriate to the task that we're doing. So it can hinder you a little bit if you're not too careful. So don't worry about that if you haven't. Right. So we are doing Lord of the Flies, but we're doing a very short section of it. And I've got a Kahoot for you at the end. So I think I've pretty much covered everything. It's nice to see how many of you are from all these different places. It's lovely. Right. Okie doke. So let's get cracking then. So paper 1, question 2 on the AQA, it is a 8 marker. And it pretty much stays the same in terms of the vocabulary that you will get and the form and structure of the question. So the only thing that changes is the little bit that I've underlined there. So how does the writer use language to describe? That all stays the same, and then you get a specific focus point. So in this case, we're going to be looking at the scenery. And then the rest of this all stays the same. So you could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. This question's really nice in that it gives you some bullet points to work with. So you're not sort of completely on a blank page, whereas in your paper 2, question 3, which is pretty much the same thing, you don't get the bullet points. So one to bear in mind, nice little reminder that it gives you 8 marks. So we're looking at between 10 and 12 minutes, I would say, to write. The exam's an hour and 45 minutes in total. You're supposed to spend about an hour on the reading section. This is one question in the reading section, one of the shorter ones, and then 45 minutes in the writing. So language features first then. Oh, it's nice to hear that one of you likes Lord of the Flies. I feel like I was too old when I read Lord of the Flies to really get into it. I think I was 18 or 19. I think it would have been much more fun if I read it when I was about 12. So what on earth are language devices? So language devices, features or techniques, they all mean the same thing. We've just got different ways of saying it because, hey, English is difficult and we like to make things difficult for ourselves. So the whole idea of them is to create some sort of clearer image in the reader's mind, making it more accessible, if you like, to a reader or a listener, depending on whether it's spoken aloud. So when it comes to language features and techniques and pulling all of those out, when you are looking at them on an individual basis where you are analysing something, you need to make sure you are saying why you think that is being done and how. So is there a particular verb in there that's really powerful that has connotations of blah, 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 whatever. I'll show you how to do that as we go along. So this is my little sort of acronym. I can never remember whether acronym's the right word for this. So might be an acrostic. I can't remember. So this is my way of remembering language devices, language features. So there's absolutely loads on there. Some of them are a little bit of a cop-out. So, and I'll run through what all of these mean in a moment. So personification, pathetic fallacy, repetition, rhetorical question, oxymoron, use of senses instead of just senses, and detailed description, little bit on the dodgy side. And then we've got sounds, and then bracketed in that, alliteration, onomatopoeia, and sibilance. Then we've also got similes, symbolism, metaphors, imagery, length of sentences, and edit. So I use this mainly as what I suggest to my students when they go into the exam. If you actually are sitting this as an exam, I know a lot of schools are sort of sitting mini exams. So even if it's not in an exam situation, this is still really to get really good and helpful to get into the practice of knowing this off pat and be able to just write it down on a piece of paper as soon as you get into the exam. If that's the pathway your schools are taking, if you're in year 11, hopefully by next year exams will be back to normal. So detailed description, length and sentences, and particularly edit. are more for the question 5 side, so more for the creative writing as a checklist, and sort of you tick off as you go along which ones you've used and which ones you haven't, and then if you've used them all at the end but not overdone it, you should come out smiling proudly. I think it's nice to just get it down right at the start so you've got it and you can use it for your question 2 as well as your question 5. So you're maximizing as much as you possibly can with it, and then it's there, and if you don't need it too much for the question 2, that's fine, you've still got it for question 5. Right, so I've got a little matchup activity. I apologize for it being a little bit blurry. I hope you can make that out. If you can't, let me know and I'll pull it up on my computer instead if I can. So you've got all the language devices on the left hand side, and on the right hand side you've got their definitions. Can you match them up for me, please? I'll put some numbers on the left hand side to make life a little bit easier. Right, I can't send you a copy of this PowerPoint, but I'm trying to think where this matchup activity is on my computer to get it so it's not so blurry. It is super blurry, isn't it? Anyway, I'll get you guys to just sort of have a go at keep doing what you're doing. See if I can find it. If there's any that you're not sure of that you want me to run through as well, please shout now. Right, is that what I want? Yes. Right, okay. Let's use this one. New share. Right, okay. Whoops. When I became a teacher, I always thought I was going to be really good at tech, and I wasn't going to be one of those fossils. Right, okay, so I've confused things now a little bit further. So is that going to let me? No, how annoying. Right, so let's move me out of the way a minute. Right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And quickly number these as well. Letters, rather. Right, okay, so let's run through them. What have we got? This is AQA exam board, Ahmed. Right, 1 to F, so personification, giving an object human attributes, absolutely. 2 to C, saying the words more than once, no. And 4 to B, asking a question that doesn't require an answer, fab. 2 to A, yeah, so where the weather reflects a mood. 1 to F we've got. I'll run through pathetic fallacy and sibilance in a minute for you. 7 to E. Yeah, good. Got 4 to, we've got 3 to C. Yep, saying the word more than once. Lovely stuff. 4, 5. We haven't got 5 yet. Fab. Putting 2 words with opposite meaning. Lovely. 6 to K. Yep. Fabulous. Oh, you're doing me out of a job here, guys. Got 5, 9 to G. Yep. Beautiful. 11 to H. Good. Fabulous. 8 to J, the repetition of same sound. Yeah, lovely. I think we've pretty much got all of those there. 10 to L. Yeah, oh, I think we've got all of them. Oh no, we're missing imagery, which is D. I think someone might have said that and I've missed it. Right, so what did we have to run over? So we had symbolism and we had pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy is relatively nice and straightforward to explain. So let me get rid of this and go back to our web page. Right, so pathetic fallacy is where the weather reflects a mood. What we mean by that is, so for example, if it was sunny outside, we might expect the mood to be happy. If it was raining, we might expect something to be really miserable and depressed. If you've got a storm going on, if you've got thunder and lightning, that might represent anger, something along those lines. Doesn't always work straightforward like that, but it does sometimes. And then we've got, is symbolism basically saying what something has connotations of? Yeah. So there's a few examples that pop up time and time again in literature, which relate to the colours being red and white. Those seem to be the two ones that stand out the most. So with red, we tend to either associate that with danger. So things like that we have stop signs that are in red, we have traffic lights which are red when we shouldn't be moving anywhere. Could also link to blood as well, or it could be to do with love and lust and all that shenanigans. And then with white, a couple of things with those could potentially be peace. It could potentially be to do with purity. So if you are a pure person, you are white, that's why brides wear white. And then going off that, so that could be an example for colours. My nice one that I tend to talk about is peace. So having a white flag representing peace, a dove representing peace, an olive branch representing peace, and this sign representing peace. All of those are symbols which go towards defining what peace is. Fab. Right, okay. What is sibilance? Thank you for reminding me. So sibilance is a specific type of alliteration to make things more complicated for us. So that is where we have a repetition of the s or the sh sound next to or near to each other at the beginning of two words or more. So for example, the seagulls squawked, or she sells seashells on the seashore. You can have a combination. It doesn't need to be two S's or two shs. It can be a combination of s and sh signs for it to be sibilance. Oxymoron is the same as juxtaposition. Yeah, so this is a really common one that I get. And the answer to that is that they are really, really similar. The difference being that oxymoron is to do with words. It's at word level. So for example, two words with opposite meanings. So alone together, warm ice, accidentally on purpose. All of those have opposite meanings. Juxtaposition is bigger. So you're looking at sentence level, paragraph level, text level, depending on how much you are looking at. And it's two ideas that conflict with one another. So for example, at the start of Harry Potter, we are told that Mr. and Mrs. Dursley are completely normal people, Thank you very much, and end of story. And then we're also told repeatedly throughout the first chapter, actually, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley have a really nasty secret that they don't want anybody to find out, so they're anything but normal. So that would be an example of juxtaposition. Is there such thing as light imagery and dark imagery, symbolizing good and evil? I would just say that the light choice symbolizes. I don't think light imagery isn't a thing, but I know what you mean. But you're absolutely right in thinking that the difference between the lights being chosen do symbolize good and evil potentially. And like one of you's just popped in spectacles at the start, it's pink and intimate, the lighting on the stage when they're all having a nice time celebrating their engagement. And then as soon as the inspector arrives, it turns to quite a harsh white. Right. Deafening silence. Yeah, pretty ugly. These are really nice ones. What is fricative alliteration? Oh, right. So we've already got someone who's given an explanation. So a consonant sign such as a f or a v produced by bringing the mouth into position. Right, so I'll explain this in a little bit more detail. I don't think I've ever had a student ask me what a fricative is before. I've had plosive, but never fricative. So do not be put off by this. This is something that you'd worry about at uni. So don't worry about it too much. It's incredibly complex, and yeah, it's really difficult to get your head around. At least I think it is, particularly the vowels. So this is a chart of all the possible sounds that we know are contained within a language somewhere in the world. There's some in here which we know are, the ones in the grey boxes we know are impossible to do, or at least at the moment that's what we think due to scientific research. Yeah, it's mental, don't worry about it too much. And then essentially these are all the ones that we know exist. So a fricative is where you bring usually your teeth together and they interact with your top lip and you get a vibration. So fricatives are all of these ones. So or at least the is it the labiolateral, I think, f and v. Rolling R's, no. So it's not, but makes perfect sense. So f, in our language we have f, th, th, s, z, sh, j. Those are all the ones we have in our language. Oh, and h as well. So it's where you have a vibration going on. You're narrowing the airflow and you get a vibration. A rolling R is slightly different. So a rolling R is a trill. So that's where your tongue is vibrating really, really loudly and really, really quickly. A normal R sound for us is this one, which is a tap. So when we say R, our tongue hits the top of our hard palate, which is the hard bit just behind your teeth. Anyway, those are what fricatives are. I won't worry about them too much. If you're into that and you want to find out more, if you search for an IPA chart and an interactive one, you can play around with it. Right. But don't worry about it too much. You don't start to worry about that until A2. So don't worry about that. Right, okay, so semantic fields. Oh my goodness, we've got so many. I'm panicking that we're not going to get to do what we want to do today, but I'd rather make sure we're all okay. So a metaphor is when you say something is something when it literally isn't. So for example, the sun is a round yellow bouncy ball. It's not. Semantic field is where you have a list of words that relate to each other. So for example, if you had fairy tales, you might have prince, princess, frog, wand, magic, witch, that sort of thing. Right. So in terms of with the IPA stuff, you don't do any of that until you get to A level, although you do occasionally have things like fricative and plosive popping up. So that's that. Fab. Right, I think I've rolled through everything in the chat. I've caught up. Yep, we will be doing a Kahoot at the end. Right, oh my goodness. Okay, so we're going to look at Lord of the Flies. So the extract we're going to be looking at is relatively short. In the AQA paper 1 question 2 question, you look at 2 small paragraphs max. So you don't have a lot to go on. You're not dealing with the whole text. You will be given these little bits of context to tell you a little bit about the background of the story. I encourage you guys to use them in your writing just to show off that you've read it all and you're being super clever. So this was written in 1958 by William Golding. And it follows a group of schoolboys whose plane has crashed on a deserted island. The adults that were driving the plane and were on the plane with them are all dead. So it is just the boys trying to work out how to survive on this island. And it gets quite dark towards the end, as I'm sure you can imagine. So our extract. Now, I haven't got loads and loads to go for. We've just got a big chunky paragraph, which is what you're likely to get in the exam. You might get 2 smaller ones, but you usually get around the 10-line mark. Okay, so the shore was fledged with palm trees. These stood or leaned or reclined against the light, and their green feathers were 100 feet up in the air. The ground beneath them was a bank covered with coarse grass, torn everywhere by the upheavals of fallen trees scattered with decaying coconuts and palm saplings. Behind this was the darkness of the forest proper and the open space of the scar. Ralph stood, one hand against a grey trunk, and screwed up his eye against the shimmering water. Out there, perhaps a mile away, the white surf flinked on a coral reef, and beyond the open sea was dark blue. Within the irregular arc of coral, the lagoon was still a mountain lake, blue of all shades and shadowy green and purple. The beach between the palm terrace and the water was a thin bow stave, endless, apparently to Ralph's left, the perspectives of palm and beach and water drew to a point at infinity, and always, almost invisibly, was the heat. So, right, so yeah, you're absolutely right. There's absolutely masses of imagery in this. Assonance. So assonance is the repetition of a vowel sound. It's sort of like alliteration, but you're looking at the vowel sounds within words. So Peter Piper picked a corn of pickled pepper, I think. So that's an example of assonance. You don't really get that much of it in normal novel texts. However, that's more sort of a poetry thing, really. Right. Okay. So let's zoom out a little bit, and we will work through. I have got tables that we can potentially have a go at. So let's separate them into 2, make life easier for ourselves. So what have we got in the comments? So we've got metaphors, juxtaposition, rise high in the bright sky. Yep. So that would be an example of assonance there. Well done, you found that. Yeah, right. Okay, so the shore was fledged with palm trees. So what does fledged mean? Any ideas? Yeah, this is looking good. So I've just checked the definition online because I knew there would be more than one definition. So you've got a couple. So you've got the adjective in that something that's fitted with feathers or a bird. Then you've also got something that is developing wing feathers, or wing feathers are developed enough for flight. So it can be both a verb and an adjective. And here it's a verb. Whoops. So it's basically associated with, oh, let me make my nib smaller. Oh no, it's on small. So the big thing to notice here is that this particular verb relates to birds, and it helps us understand the density as well. Now, can a shore actually fledge? No. Or can palm trees fledge? No. So we've also got some personification going on there. Right, these stood or leaned or reclined against the light. So we're now being told that these trees are standing or leaning or reclining. So we've got more personification. Let's link that up there. We also have a rule of three, or a triad, or a triplet, or a triple, or a tripartite. I've had another one come up and I can't remember what it is. One that only came up once, I think. So we've got three verbs all next to each other there, describing what they look like. So reclined against the light, and their green feathers were 100 feet up in the air. So again, here we've got this metaphor, and we've now got a little bit of semantic fields going on. So I'm going to stick that over there, otherwise I'm going to struggle to write everything on here. So we've got fledged, which relates to birds, and we've also got feathers as well. So this becomes a semantic field because we both relate them to birds. Right, okay, so the ground beneath them was a bank covered with coarse grass, torn everywhere by the upheavals of fallen trees, scattered with decaying coconuts and palm saplings. So, just double checking the Q&A. I'll look at always in a moment in the next part. So we've got metaphor, yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't use like or as. So if it said the leaves were like green feathers, then that would be a simile. Absolutely. Yeah, lots of sophisticated vocabulary as well. And we've got lots relating to trees and nature as well. So we've got a semantic field of that going on as well, which we would expect if you're describing a landscape. And again, torn here, that seems quite violent to me. Sort of conflicting and rough. So as potentially we could say, well, at the start, it's actually really positive and it sounds lovely. And then we get to here and that seems quite odd, quite harsh compared to everything that we've covered already. So because that is going over the sentence line, if you like, we haven't just got two words that we can put in isolation and say, yep, that's an oxymoron. It would be a juxtaposition. Right, behind this was the darkness of the forest proper and the open space of the scar. So the open space of the scar refers to where the plane has crash landed. So that would be a metaphor. You wouldn't be expected to know that in the exam. And I wouldn't, even if I had I'm thinking sort of, even if I had a really intelligent student, like grade 9 student, and I got them to read just this with the information I'd given them, I think they'd be pretty hard pressed to know that that's a metaphor. So you don't need to worry about that if you think, I've no idea where you've got that from, Vicky. That is purely because I've read the book. And then you could also have sibilance here because you've got space of the scar. Juxtaposition between the softness of trees, and then, yeah, verbs like torn and scar. So yeah, Scar also sounds really violent and rough. This is getting a mess already. So yeah, it is very positive, and suddenly it gets sort of violent in a indirect way, if you like. And then obviously we've got the mention of lighting here as well. Are you likely to get a Shakespeare play for this question? Absolutely not. No. Please do not worry about that. So in your English language papers, in paper 1, you will be given a 20th or 21st century text from usually quite a random source. It won't be something that's well read and that's on reading lists, so it definitely won't be a text you've studied at GCSE for the language paper. So don't expect anything popular. We will do a Kahoot at the end, I promise. So, oh, how have I paused my share? Why is that a thing? Can you guys still see my screen? Right, let me try that again. There we go. Are we all right now? Has that sorted it? Yeah, fab. Right. I don't know why it paused that. Fab. Right. Okay. So over to the next page then. So we've covered personification a couple of times and a metaphor as well. So ideas, thoughts. If I said to you, go off and analyze that particular quotation for me, what direction would you guys go in? What sorts of things would you like to mention? Not expecting you to write a beautiful essay for me here, just a couple of ideas, like mini bullet points, if you like. Apologies, I'm really sorry that you couldn't see it with the annotations. I'm really, really sorry. I'll flick back whilst you guys are coming up with some ideas. So we're looking at, yep, so rule of 3. So with things, if we're planning analysis here, when the water goes to the shore, yeah, we will get onto that in a minute. So the first things I would go for is that this relates to nature, in that we're talking about birds and the semantic field there, which fits in nicely. And it creates a tricolon. Thank you. That was the one I couldn't remember. Yeah, tricolon is the other version of another name for rule of 3. Gives us an idea of density. All of these includes imagery, so you could write imagery for any of these. Stood, leaned, or reclined. Now, for these, I would go for connotations. That is, it is a relaxed place to be, it is enjoyable, and it is picturesque. Yep, so stood, leaned, or reclined would all be examples of personification. And as you said, we could go for rule of 3 here. And then green feathers, I would go for, again, relating to nature. And I think sort of making the landscape less harsh, less jagged. Because in my head, when I think of palm trees, which is what this is talking about, I think of palm trees as being quite harsh, having some really jagged edges. And, you know, you can cut yourself pretty well with a palm leaf if you're not too careful. Whereas describing them as feathers immediately softens it and makes that environment, I think, more welcoming in our head. At least that's my thought. Right, okay, let's have a look at, oh, we've got another couple of bits. Right, so, oh, I didn't mention this one, so hyperbole, 100 feet up in the air. So that refers to the leaves. So why we know that this is written from the perspective of, like, the basis is boys. So hyperbole is an exaggeration. So are they actually 100 feet up in the air? Probably not. Why might we be viewing this? Well, if you think of these boys are 11, 12. They're still going to be pretty tiny. So these will be, I think giant's an exaggeration here, or let's go for viewed as bigger due to their size. And then open scarver space, I'm going to leave that one because that's taking things a little bit further. Right, let's have a look at this one. So Ralph stood one hand against a grey trunk. So somebody mentioned colour here. And so that's sort of, the colouring is sort of quite bleak here and changing, and screwed up his eyes against the shimmering water. To me, that is really positive. Out there, perhaps a mile away, the windsurf flinked on a coral reef. So we've got some more personification going on here. And beyond that, the open sea was dark blue. Again, we've got some reference of colours. Within the irregular arc of coral, so, and lagoon was still a mountain lake. So how it's being described is quite interesting, but there isn't anything going on in terms of language devices. Although I think this particular piece of imagery here is absolutely gorgeous and I love it. Right, blue of all shades, shadowy green and purple, so giving us some more depth. The beach between the palm terrace and the water was a thin bow stave. Endless, apparently, for to Ralph's left, the perspectives of palm and beach drew to a point of infinity. So here we've got hyperbole and a metaphor as well. So, oh, still as a mountain lake, I missed that. So we've got a couple of examples. So white surf linked, in terms of analysis, I don't think that's particularly interesting. And I think it is fair to say that you would be told what flinked means, because it's something that Golding made up for this book. So it means curiosity, to be curious rather, because it's a verb. So that, to me, shouts playful nature, which in turn could relate to the boys, because we're told that we know that there is a group of boys. So that would make sense. Still as a mountain lake, so we've got that relaxed, calm feeling again. And then the hyperbole, the sort of sense of being small and insignificant. That's what I would go for there. Right. So we then need to make a choice about what we want to choose. And my advice for you guys is, obviously this is only an 8 marker, so we're looking at 2 chunky paragraphs. I would say choose the ones that you think you can say the most about. So I'm going to model what a good one would look like. So let me whiz over to the text editor. I will come back to your question, Michelle, in a moment. Right, so I always start off within this extract. You can start differently. It's just a habit that I've got into. So immediately, instead of saying the writer, I'm saying Golding. If you say the writer, that's fine as well. It doesn't get you any marks, but I think it's a nice way to show off to the examiner that you've read everything and you've understood absolutely everything that they've given you. Create strong imagery. Actually, before I get cracking even further, just refresh you of what the question was, which was here. How does the writer use language to describe the scenery? So with this, it's really nice because there isn't anything else really that is mentioned that is outside of what your focus point. So you can pretty much talk about anything there, but be careful when you are answering that question that you are looking at the specific focus point they've given you, because it's really easy to go off track and not do that. So create strong imagery, excuse me, by using personification. So I've got my point, I've got my terminology in there, and I'm also going to explain what specifically is being done there. Then I'm going to embed my quotation. So this means, I mean by that it's, I'm not saying, I know this because, or the extract says this, or for example, blah de blah. The examples are really looking for you to embed your quotations because it's slightly more sophisticated, but actually it's a really straightforward thing to do, really. Suggests that the scene is both picturesque. So at the moment, I am talking about basic analysis here and connotations. Then I'm going to zoom in on a particular word. So the verb recline suggests that the trees are sloping almost to the point of lying down. Also, the repeated use, I'm not sure whether any of you noticed this, of the conjunction or suggests that the writer is trying to evoke a casual tone, which in turn represents the serenity of the island. So I've started off with some just basic analysis, then I've focused in, I've zoomed in on a specific word, talked about the connotations of that and related that to imagery. And then I've talked about the idea that we've got this repetition of or in between, so leaned or stood or, reclined. So why have that? Because it sounds quite disjointed and it sounds casual, essentially. Picturesque means something that is really beautiful or lovely, and I think along those lines. Right, okay. So that's my first paragraph. Now, it doesn't look massively chunky on this screen because the text editor likes to make it look like you haven't written very much and it's a bit soul destroying. But that's one chunky-ish paragraph. There's definitely more that could be added to that, but you'd probably still get your 7-8 marks for that as it is. Taking it further would be brilliant, but you probably won't squeeze too much more out of it. But if we wanted to do that, so casual tone represents the islands, we could then grab another piece of evidence to support that claim. So let's look at something which again has the idea of it being relaxed. Let's go for where is it? I'm going to go for the water drew to a point of infinity, I think. Remind myself because my brain's useless. Water drew to a point of infinity. And then I'm going to say this also makes the reader feel small and insignificant due to the beauty of the landscape. Right, second paragraph. So I'd say do 2 chunky paragraphs for this. So the use of hyperbole suggests that the island's beauty is incomprehensible. And what's really nice about this as well is that that links really nicely to what I've just finished off with that paragraph. So I'm going to embed my quotation again. So the water was, and then I'm going to put dot, dot, dot. Which just shows the examiner that, yes, I've cut out the bit in the middle because I didn't want to talk about it. So this could imply that Ralph is overwhelmed by the enormity of the land, because remember, we're looking from Ralph's perspective here. The use of the adverb apparently, again, going to zoom in on a word, suggests that Ralph is flippant about his observations and is happy to be overcome by nature. Get rid of that extra S. So 2 chunky-ish paragraphs there, and there is more that you could add on to that one as well. So beauty is incomprehensible. And then we could also say, so let's use that example that's just been put into the chat. So the metaphor describing the palm trees also helps to soften the landscape and make it appear perfect, or at least in the view of the narrator. Right, okay, so we will leave that for today, and we will head over to Kahoot. So this is some, what's the word that I want? Some language devices that are from poems, but we've covered most of them today in class. So although they're from poems, it is to it's not really much different in terms of, thought it would be easier to do it from poems than just making some up, because poets are better at making up suggestions than I am. Yeah, I'll go back to the answer whilst people are joining. I've put the code in the chat for you guys. There you go. Oh, loads of you have hopped on already. Right, I'll give you 30 seconds to get over there if you haven't already. Someone asked about improving vocabulary. This is what I really struggled with at school. I didn't read a lot when I was at school, and then once I started reading in year 11, I improved by a grade, and that was literally the only thing that changed, because I didn't have any English tuition, English teaching contact hours when I was in year 11. So read is my answer to that. I know that's not a particularly helpful one because you want a quick fix, but I don't think there is really a quick fix to it. If there was, I would tell you. So a couple of these have more than one answer. If you think, oh, I don't know, and you think, oh, I think it's 2 of them, but you can't select 2, that's fine. You can only select 1. So choose the one that you're more confident in, would be my advice for that. Fab, yeah, so the repetition of the l sound there. Now is also the time, if there's any other questions, we're probably going to have a few minutes at the end to be able to do that anyway. But if you're not playing along, now's the time for questions. And also, fabulous. People have put Caesura. You know what? I think that is a Caesura. I hadn't noticed that Caesura was on there because I changed the options from non-poetry related stuff. I'm going to check that now. Fab. I just double checked it's not a Caesura because it has a comma at the end of the line, but the comma wasn't on that question, so I thought I got rid of all of those. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, you could have it as sibilance, but it's not particularly interesting. It's not done intentionally there. This is one of my favourite poems to teach, Charge of the Light Brigade. Yep, fab. Yep, fab. Lovely. So pathetic fallacy being where the weather reflects the mood. This is one that we haven't covered today. Xeomorphism is a particular type of personification, which is a verb or an action, a word that you associate with a particular animal. So, for example, roar you would associate with a lion. So, if we said the crowd roared, that would be zoomorphism. Also, if there's anything that you want me to cover next week or the week after for in the other two sessions, in A Christmas Carol and The Lovely Bones, now's your time to let me know so I can do that for you. If there's anything you think I haven't covered that you would have liked me to have done, then please do shout. Yeah, so you've got as it rips through his life. It's not actually functioning as a simile there, though. Right. Getting towards the end. Fab. Yeah, I spoke to you earlier about piece, the symbolism. Fab. Lovely stuff. Beautiful. And then last one. Lovely stuff. Right. Oh, I'm very impressed, guys. That's cracking scores. Fabulous. Right. Well done. Right. So I will see you guys next week at the same time. We'll be doing Christmas Carol. Have a lovely week. If you're on your break, have a lovely break and go out and enjoy some sunshine. Have a lovely week, guys. See you next week.